Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this third edition of the European Cancer Forum. We would have loved to meet you all in person, but things are as they are, and I hope that the discussion will be as lively as a live meeting. Let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Stefan Gijsels. I am currently chair of the Patient Expert Center here in Belgium. I'm co-founder and former CEO of Digestive Cancers Europe, and I'm a colorectal cancer survivor myself. Been very active in patient advocacy in the past few years. Today, we will engage with some of the leading figures in European cancer policy, from the patient community, the medical community, policy and academia, and we will have very good discussions. In the audience, we'll also have representatives from patient community, medical community, academia, industry. This is your meeting, so we want to make this as interactive as possible. We will not have any slide decks or PowerPoint presentations. What we want to do is to have a discussion, a real engagement, listening, talking, asking questions to the experts, and that is your opportunity to ask questions. So in Clevercast at the bottom, you will have a place where you can see questions and comments. Use that place to ask questions relevant to the three panels that we will have. So the first panel will be on the Beating Cancer Plan itself and the granularity to which plans need to be developed. The second panel will be on data and statistics and health information in general. And the third panel will be on measuring progress, making sure that we monitor progress, that there's a governance structure in place to make sure that progress is being tracked and traced. So ask your questions in relevance to the panels at hand. We will cluster these questions and then we will share them with the panel. You can also indicate which of the panelists you would like to answer the question, but there's no guarantee that we will follow that because I think everybody in the panel can participate. In between the different panels, we will have little multiple choice questions through Slido. And at the moment when that takes place, you will get a QR code on your screen that is shown here. You can do it through the QR code by pointing your camera of your smartphone to the code, and you will be directly linked to slido.com, or you can do it in your browser, typing in slido.com and the number ECF 2021. Easy to do. We look forward to your responses. Let's start. I have to say that this is an initiative by MSD in collaboration with European Cancer Patient Coalition, Lung Cancer Europe, and the Swedish Institute for Health Economics. So thank you all for your active support in getting this organized. Let me first introduce the first speaker, is Klaus Feldman. He's Vice President Oncology for the commercial organization of MSD in Europe and Canada. Klaus, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Stefan, and thank you again for joining us. I know it's your precious time on a fine Friday. So thanks for introducing me, and it's great that we have the opportunity to discuss on our third edition of the European Cancer Forum. And mind you, we have been on a forced timeout caused by the COVID-19 challenge and pandemic. The ongoing pandemic, it makes this virtual conference even more timely and more needed. And as Europe attempts to get back on its feet, we need to address the legacy the pandemic is leaving behind, including a major backlog of screening, diagnosis, and treatments negatively impacting patients with cancer. And I would really think that this European Cancer Forum has played its very important role in Europe's Beating Cancer Plan. And just mind you, since the 2018 first edition of this ECF, we witnessed a significant increase in the political will to address cancer as a joint societal challenge and priority. starting with Member of European Parliament Manfred Weber, and later the official commitment by Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission. 2021, Stella Kyriakides, the European Commissioner for Health, launched Europe's Beating Cancer Plan. Many of you here in the audience today have contributed through our polling during the past ECFs to identify the top policy priorities for the cancer plan, which have then been presented to the European Commission. A simple but important question is, what next? And this is probably my most important message, and I really strongly believe in it. Today, we are going to take our discussion about the Europeans' Beating Cancer Plan to the next level, shifting from planning to implementation. And implementation is the most crucial action now. MSD, like many here today, welcomes the European Beating Cancer Plan. And this audience isn't unclear at all about our joint sense of urgency to proceed quickly on first implementation successes. And I, as a scientist by training, believe in a simple correlation. What gets measured gets done. And I'm very hopeful if this plan gets successfully implemented, meaning that the initiatives and actions of this plan are put into practice, our patients will benefit most. If we are not successful, let me also be clear, if we are not successful, we may see health outcomes diverge further between those countries and regions which take up the measures and those which do not. It will be crucial that Europe works together to seize the most of this opportunity for all. One of the things the European Union does really well is to cooperate, share best practice, exchange views in a robust, constructive way to the benefit of its citizens. Let me come back one more time to how instrumental it is also to measure the progress and impact along our plan to implement. And this is exactly what we are here to discuss today. I'm looking forward to a lively, interactive debate, as Stefan also mentioned, between panelists and the overall audience. I mean, now it's the time to act, and let's walk our talk. Let me be a bit more specific. We will collect the findings, conclusions from today's discussion. We will create a report, and we will share it with policymakers and stakeholders. We will present the final report at our upcoming event on World Cancer Day in February next year. And at MSD, we are especially proud of our commitment to bring stakeholders together, to discuss, to collaborate, which really makes a real difference to patients in Europe and around the world. All of us at this forum has a specific part to play. Let me give the example on behalf of MSD. I mean, our core competence and commitment is to continue to drive intensive research and science efforts leading to medicines which will change patient lives. As medicines are an essential part of furthering cancer outcome, but are not sufficient to finally succeed on our ambitious EU cancer plan, it takes many, many more efforts, like prevention, diagnosis, and also caring for patients and survivors before declaring success. Let me close by thanking you all again for your unwavering commitment. Special thanks to our partners, including the European Cancer Patient Coalition, the Lung Cancer Europe, and the Swedish Institute for Health Economics, and all others who have contributed to past and this and future editions of this forum. Thank you so much, and back to you, Stefan. I guess.
Thank you, Klaus. Thank you for your inspiring introduction. I think your commitment to finding treatments for cancer is much appreciated, as well as your willingness to engage and your openness to partner with other stakeholders. Much appreciated. Thank you for introduction. We'll be back later at the end of the session for some concluding remarks. But now I would like to invite Tit Albrecht to the meeting. Good morning, Tit. You're in beautiful Slovenia from what I see.
Well, currently the valley would be covered in snow, but as we had a significant snowfall last night, but that's okay.
Tit, I don't think you need introduction. Anybody active in cancer policy in the past decades knows you, but still know that you are the coordinator of the joint action plan of the Innovative Partnership for Action Against Cancer, and also very active in your country, Slovenia, for everything related to cancer. Cancer World once called you the Europe's unofficial head of cancer policy. Is this true? Are you?
I don't think I reached that far. It is. I would stress that in any field of work today, it is always a teamwork and multi-professional, multidisciplinary inputs are essential. Of course, I see many around the table who have done significant work in their respective fields in cancer, and without each and every one of them, you could not formulate successful priorities for cancer policy in Europe. Research and good professional work are the basis of decisions today. If they are not, then such policy doesn't count a lot.
Right. Europe started with its Europe Against Cancer plan already in the 80s, I think 85, if not mistaken. You've been formally part of it since early 2000s. What has happened over this long period? And how would you place the Beating Cancer plan in the context of this long evolution? What have you seen as progress in policy and results over the years?
I think the process started by some of the great and important personalities in cancer world in Europe, like Professor Veronesi, who were the spiritual, let's say, leaders and inspirers of the first Europe Against Cancer program. That program was essential because it streamlined for the first time in the European Union, which was then smaller than today, some of the very important issues. After all, the recommendations on screening that we are still using, we know that we always complain that they are too old now, but they resulted from that program. So you see that such a document from such a program can outlive many of its creators. And I remember how emotional also for many people the celebration of the 30 years of that program in Luxembourg was a few years ago. And I think this was the first important milestone and the first mobilization of resources in Europe where it became necessary, it became evident that it's necessary to invest so much. Then, of course, we had the enlargement of the Union. Maybe the Union wanted to take a breath from such a program. The new states, we have to say that we were not happy about the issue because we understood that cancer is by far not solved in 2003. And we know that, of course, it is just increasing in incidence, of course, not everywhere, fortunately anymore, but in many places. And of course, I always, speaking of cancer policy and mobilization, I see now that we move to another phase. Now we managed to convince the policymakers, because now it was also the policymakers who were driving this new plan, the Europe's Beating Cancer plan, having the president of the European Commission, the vice president, the commissioner for health, all, not only supporting but very vividly standing behind such a document means an endorsement that probably in '85 they could just dream of.
What do you expect now from the Beating Cancer Plan itself? I mean, it's a kind of a booster, if I can use that word that we hear so often these days.
I see three things. First of all, I see, of course, the continuation of a process which now turns to policy. So now the policy makers, as we say in our language, bought the idea. So now they are convinced that this is an important and vital element of health policy in Europe. I think that it is an important message for the entire Union, which now counts 27 member states, which has differences. We are not happy with the differences. So this is the second thing. It addresses the differences within the Union, within the countries, and everything that is unacceptable, and that you, Stefan, from your work also know very well, your engagement in digestive cancers and so on, that is painful, to say the least. The third thing, of course, which is a new thing and a challenge, but I think also an opportunity, is that years ago, member states were not enthusiastic about the Commission taking up the lead on health issues. Well, public health, yes, they said, okay, let them do public health, but not involving healthcare. But now we have the first time a top-down document. I'm not saying it was not developed as a top-down, but it is de facto a top-down document which now delegates to the member states important homework. And this homework has to be carried out in the member states, of course.
And can you be a little bit more specific about what the expectations are from the member states? How does that work operationally? Do they get a specific mandate to come with their own version of it at national level?
The main challenge, and I have to say also a little bit of a risk of this plan, is that, of course, the entire or a large part of the implementation, practical implementation, is within the member states. So the Commission cannot tell them that they have to set up screening programs for 90%. They will try, but the recommendations are in place, have been in place for almost 20 years. So this is a challenge, but I would say that now with all the financial support for applied projects, for joint actions, for research projects, and nonetheless also the RRF, which of course is there not directly because of cancer, but it can also be used in trying to address cancer. And I heard already that some member states will use it to strengthen their cancer infrastructure. That means quite a different step. It's a step towards the famous concept of the European Health Union.
Right. One of the things that are striking when we look at figures of overall survival in certain types of cancer are the results of Slovenia. I mean, you've been very instrumental in achieving that. What has Slovenia done to make sure that this mind shift also at the political level took place to invest in cancer policy?
One thing is that we had have always had a very hard-working team of epidemiologists around the cancer registry. The cancer registry is one of the oldest in Europe. It was established in 1950. We have digitalized the registry already in the early 2000s completely. So this enables the team with excellent data. Of course, this still doesn't secure implementation, as you say, but it was the joint effort in the recent years, also together with our Institute for Public Health, evidence, and a lot of pressure, I have to say. This way, we managed to convince people, good communication as well. We used all potential channels, and we are still using them. So public health approaches were very important. at least 50% of the outcomes are based on the public health interventions and approaches. In colorectal cancer, I have to say there were other factors, like the establishment of MDTs as a compulsory method of work, which significantly contributed to missed cancers on presentation and so on, or missed in extended cancers on presentation, because one of our, let's say, stars now is exactly this, these cancers, because we, in the last analysis of the survival, we extended the 5-year survival, relative survival for colorectal cancer by 17%. And this is the result of both activities. So screening plus a very concerted activity in the clinical field.
Right. And I understand also from what you say that it's very important to have data and statistics just to convince politicians to move things forward, to track progress. And we'll come back to that later. You mentioned one thing is of course lifestyle, and I think this is in for all public health specialists and policymakers the real challenge. I think if you ask people, are you aware of the lifestyle choices that are healthy? People will know that you don't have to smoke, that you don't have to drink moderate alcohol, have physical activity. I think 99% of people are aware of it. But when you look at actual implementation, is only 3% of people probably do it. You know, I'm not familiar with the exact statistics, but that's the impression that I have as an outsider. Is that not one of the first frustrating things, that not only there's no policy, but people do not act on it? What can be done more to have the citizen mobilized to take care of their health in a different way than it's happening today?
Well, I think the lessons learned from smoking are very instructive. We've known smoking was damaging our health since the 50s, early 50s, actually, if we look at the work of Doll and Pito. And people, first, the change was just towards increased prevalence of smoking. And it took a long time to first convince the tobacco industry of their responsibility, because that in that case, this is a major factor, and has been, and it still is, unfortunately, I have to say. And then, you know, how you sell the image. In those of us who are older remember how American movies looked like years ago. A successful man comes home, lights up a cigarette and drinks a glass of whiskey. This was the success person. This is how you project the images. The other lifestyle determinants, which are now very critical, I would say they are now, because of COVID, more critical than the other ones, though I'm not saying that we solved the problem of alcohol. And I think it's very good that the Commission addressed alcohol. I just don't know how much they're able really to hold the grip on that. But physical activity and nutrition suffered a lot during COVID. So it's the double mission now. First of all, we have to make people move again much more than they did, because they were limited. They were forcefully limited because we had to. But this is now taking too long, so we will have to address this specifically. And nutrition is, of course, a complex problem now. As we know, it's not only a problem of prevention, it's also a problem of global sustainability, of health in general, and so on. One of the things where we need to team up with other communities is exactly lifestyles. We will benefit all chronic diseases if we address lifestyles. So it's not only a mission for cancer, it's also for cardiovascular, diabetes, neurodegenerative, osteoporosis, and so on and so forth. So the problem of these 4 determinants is comprehensive, and if we in cancer community defend them, others can just join in, and or we can all work together to address them. I think that the continuity of the process is going to be most important in addressing them.
Okay, wonderful. It's a good sequence to my last question to you is, when you look in your crystal ball, what can we achieve in 10 years from now? What is the progress that you see as a realistic ambition to achieve?
When I started working in public health 30 years ago, 29 actually, yesterday was or 2 days ago was my anniversary.
Congratulations for that.
People were saying, what you do in prevention or what you do in reducing the burden of chronic diseases shows in 20 years. People have no patience. People they won't live to see the results. Politicians are not interested because it's too far. We cannot look at it like that anymore. We know that, first of all, it's not true. And we have to repeat that over and over again, because there are still decision makers who think it is, but it's not. And we have shown, for example, with the colorectal cancer screening, we reduced incidence in a few years' time because of the nature of this cancer, of course. It's not universally applicable, but it shows. And of course, it strengthens the message. Also, when we promoted against smoking, we had evidence. I will tell you this. Many people say politicians don't read and they don't like big books of 200 pages with a lot of tables and numbers and so on. Yes, they don't read, but they have advisory teams who do. So it's over with that story. You should give them just a small summary, because they need to face the parliament. They need to face people who are prepared, who have also different interests. Maybe they are not so excited about prevention, not so excited about better care, and they will bring their own numbers. So it is worthwhile. It is necessary, actually, to bring this evidence. And I think that the fact that the Commission decided to develop the Cancer Knowledge Center within JRC is also part of that awareness and commitment.
Right, wonderful. Thank you, Tit. We'll see you later during the session in one of the panel discussions. Thank you for your commitment and energy. I think it's very infectious, and we'll get back to you later. Next step that we're going to do, as I mentioned, we are going to do a quick survey among our attendees. What you can do is go to the Slido.com website and then type in the code hashtag ECF 2021 or use the QR code. And as you see, you have 3 questions, a little bit provocative. Does every cancer type need a cancer plan? And you can answer no, an overall cancer plan is sufficient. Yes, every type of cancer requires a different approach, or we don't need plans. We have to work case by case. And I will leave people answer the question so that we can have a discussion later. I don't see much moving on my screen, but I assume that people are typing in their answers. We'll wait a few minutes and then we can start with our discussion on the next panel. I see it's moving. 75% that every type of cancer needs a different approach. An overall plan is sufficient, gaining a little bit ground, and case by case is clearly not the preferred option at the moment. Things are still moving. Okay, let's stop it here. Many thanks for your reactions. We see that 71% of the participants really want to have, for every type of cancer a different approach. Thank you for this, and I think it's a good start of our next panel discussion. Let me introduce the three panelists. First, we have Theodora Kolarova, who's the Executive Director of the International Neuroendocrine Cancer Alliance. Welcome, Theodora. We have Antonella Cardone, Director of the European Cancer Patient Coalition. Welcome, Antonella. And we have Dr. Ioannis Bukovinas, who is head of the Bioclinic Oncology Unit in Thessaloniki in Greece. Welcome to our panel, Dr. Bukovinas. Thank you all for joining. Quick reaction to the survey and maybe give your initial points. Theodora, why don't you start?
Thanks, Stefan, and thanks for the privilege to contribute to this discussion. I fully agree with what the Slido results have showed in this quick survey. I do think that every cancer has their own specific needs. And coming from an umbrella organization which actually works with a full family of heterogeneous cancers known as neuroendocrine tumors, but ranging from more indolent tumors to very rapidly progressive aggressive types, I can say that there are very, very specific unmet needs within the community which need to be addressed via a tailored approach that's embraced and implemented on a national level to create an optimal care pathway for every type of cancer. And we can't see competition among various types of cancers based on incidence or prevalence, for example, because these are very dynamic, let's say, parameters, and obviously varying across different countries and nationalities. So what we need to do is really work collaboratively, as the previous speaker said. I think this is a mantra that is being heard more and more often, and hopefully it's put into action. But we need to make all stakeholders understand that we need actions and that we need good understanding of what the unmet needs are. Because there are cancers like neuroendocrine tumor family, for example, which are very misunderstood, very underrepresented and under-researched, and this creates a lot of confusion in the whole spectrum, and a lot of delays in diagnosis, a lot of unoptimal or suboptimal treatment, which gravely affects the condition of our patients, on top of the grave inequalities and inequities to access to diagnostics and care across the various countries, not only in Europe.
Okay, thank you, Theodora. Let's move on to Antonella. Antonella, first I want to thank you for your flexibility to participate in this panel. Anne-Marie Baird, who was scheduled to participate on behalf of Lung Cancer Europe, had an emergency, unfortunately, so she couldn't attend. And Antonella, you replaced her in this panel, so thanks for that. Your quick reaction on the survey and maybe give the perspective of all cancer patients on the question of the granularity of the plans.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. So, well, I also agree with the majority of the audience. As you know, each cancer has its own specificities. Although from a broader perspective and addressing all cancers as we do with my organization, it's also important to acknowledge that there are a lot of similarities between different cancer types, and for an economy of scale, approaching all those similarities together is also very important. Then in general, on the Europe's Beating Cancer plan, I can say that it is definitely a good plan. And we like that it states that the plan places the interests and the well-being of patients and the population at its center.
Okay.
The plan is a clear sign sent to member states of where the priorities should lay at country level to make sure that there is a coordinated effort to reduce the rising trend of cancer and fill the gaps between member states. The plan also looks at all aspects of the cancer journey, from prevention to early diagnosis to access to treatment and survivorship. And as a cancer patient organization, we have been an active part of the consultation process set up by the European Commission. And we must say that it was not done just to tick a box. We have been actually heard by the European Commission as we saw our asks included in the final plan. Of course, now it is important to make sure that the implementation is a success. And that can only happen if it is done in close collaboration with the member states and all the relevant stakeholders. The member states should follow the indications of the plan and synergize with the plan. And so only doing so, the impact of the plan will be amplified. And the best outcome of the European plan can only happen if member states endorse the European plan fully and embed it into their national cancer control plans. I would also like to see the national cancer plan being a sort of execution plan of the wide European plan. And that would be ideal and definitely lead to the successful implementation of the plan.
Thank you, Antonella. I think that's a very clear message. May I remind all of you attendees that you can ask questions in the question and comment section at the bottom of your Clevercast platform. Feel free to start, sending questions over, and we'll take them into account for the discussion that will start in a minute. But let's first go to Dr. Ioannis Bukovinas from Greece. You've been very instrumental in setting up a lung cancer plan in your country. Can you give some comments on that? What's the importance of having a very specific lung cancer plan?
Yes, thank you, Stefan. Thank you all for the privilege to be here with you. I will share my opinion and my action as a former president of National Medical Society in Greece. We understood that there was no willingness from the government to put a national cancer plan in action. Even with the announcement of Europe-Beating Cancer Plan, the vast majority of the actions of the government was to put emphasis on infrastructures. For example, in Greece, there is no official registry of cancers, and of course, there is no electronic medical health record in development. So we decided to do something for the third cause of death in Greece, which is lung cancer. And you know that lung cancer kills as many people as the three other major cancers, prostate, colon, and breast cancer. So if it is not a pandemic, it's an epidemic. And that's why we put the agenda in a public view what will be for a lung cancer plan, because lung cancer, as I explained, is a strategic priority, is a public health issue, is a race against time because the patients deteriorating so quickly, is at the crossroads of availability of new drugs and new technologies implemented in the trajectory of lung cancer patient, and of course is a major focus for research because we saw that the 5-year mortality rate declined the last years because of such good things happen. So we suggested this type of agenda to the governors, and we are waiting for their reaction in order to implement it in different settings: prevention, early diagnosis, and the management of the disease in a pilot phase, and secondly, to increase the visibility of the plan all over Greece.
Okay, thank you. You also had a very good point that we, in the previous discussion that we had on the importance of reimbursements of biomarkers. I think this is a topic that is probably on the agenda across Europe. Can you maybe say your point on that too?
Yes, in the vast majority of cancers, and especially in lung cancer, the biomarkers have revolutionized the treatment of the patients. And we are not talking only about tissue biomarkers, but also plasma. With the advent of NGS and liquid biopsies and all the new drugs coming at the forefront of the treatment, we see that there could be a specialized treatment for every patient. That's why we need to increase the awareness about in political persons about the reimbursement of such markers or technologies that could be a major part of our plan. I think that in the vast majority of European countries, a lot of markers are not reimbursed, and if you can think the amount of money spent to the drugs indifferently, you can save much more money by doing this.
Yeah, I've heard of situations where people were put on chemotherapy, and if it doesn't work, then afterwards the biomarker test is being done. It's sometimes a little bit bizarre because it puts the patient and the family in a very difficult position during that whole period. Antonella, you wanted to react?
Yes, as for us, as mentioned now, biomarker testing is crucial, and unfortunately, we have done a study, and the study has shown that clearly there are huge inequalities across Europe. There are countries in Northern Europe where biomarker testing is accessible and reimbursed to the majority of the population. Countries in Central and Western Europe, where it is the situation is good but could be improved. But then countries, essentially in Eastern European countries, where biomarker testing is not accessible to many, to the majority, and there are huge infrastructural changes that need to be made in order to make biomarker testing accessible to all. And for instance, I can also mention that to this extent, we are working now together with EFPIA on setting up a task force to support the implementation of Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, specifically on personalized medicine and including new diagnostic tools and biomarker tests, for the reasons that also that Ioannis mentioned. So it is not only for the quality of life of the patients, but also governments would benefit because there would be a reduction in the costs of the therapies. It will improve the quality of life of cancer survivors. So it is really key to us that biomarker tests are broadly available across Europe.
Thank you, Antonella. Additional, Ioannis, you wanted to react to that?
Yes, if I will add to this, there are also some markers you could use to avoid unnecessary follow-ups, and it is very, very important.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that additional comment. Theodora, your perspective, I know you have an international responsibility, but from your Bulgarian background, I mean, how does that work? What can be done to persuade politicians and policymakers in a country like Bulgaria to move things forward and take this step that was suggested?
Well, that's always a tough one. I think one successful, approach when it comes to policymakers is to shame them into not offering to their own population whatever is available in the next country or just a few kilometers away within the same continent. And of course, evidence-based advocacy here plays a major role. We do need to create, to generate evidence, real-world evidence that can make us, can help us make our point in a very demanding and definitive manner. And this is something that luckily is growing in the patient community. There's a lot of data out there already that can help benchmark those inequities. And that's the only way to actually make policymakers focus on improvements as a priority. Again, realizing that there's a lot of economic benefit in addition to benefit for the patient, just what Antonella just touched upon. Of course, there's always this economic dimension of how we treat our patients and how we ensure that they have reasonable and better quality of life. So I would say that these would be the ways to persuade politicians to have a focus on where we need them to focus.
And do you think that, I mean, we heard from Antonella that ECPC was formally part of discussions with the European Commission. They're working with FPA to change policy. Also, from the neuroendocrine cancer perspective, are you involved in these processes, and what can be done to have a kind of a formal engagement, not only at European level, between patient organizations and policymakers, but also at national level? Can that become a standard so that you have a more insight and participation in how national plans are being set up?
Well, that definitely is the target, and again, luckily it's improving over time. I would say that these are two quite different things. You know, the European plan is like an overarching guideline recommendation, and then of course implementation goes back to what we do on a national level. So in terms of providing input into the European plan, the International Neuroendocrine Cancer Alliance is a member of the European Cancer Organization, as well as WeCan, and both those organizations have been very involved in providing insights and informing the plan. So I would say that this is the avenue through which we articulated our perspective. And then going back to national, I do think that the role of the patient organizations should be recognized as it needs to be, and really elevated and acknowledge the contribution that patient organizations can make as a partner in all discussions, and driving programs like educational programs or awareness programs, for example, especially in the less understood and less common cancers, is, I think, a benchmark priority that should be embraced.
Okay, thank you. Antonella, you want to react?
Well, I would like to complement what Teodora just said about how member states and countries like Bulgaria could benefit from the Europe's Beating Cancer plan. And so how can policymakers can be motivated to put in place the measures, including in the plan? I think that, as Tit mentioned at the beginning, there are also monetary incentives. So there are funds now available. And I think that governments, and hopefully essentially governments in most need, like governments in Eastern European countries, would benefit from these monetary incentives, from these funds, and actually I think also that we as cancer patient organizations have a role to play there, to push for the governments to apply for these funds. And maybe they need help. We need to advocate. We need to put pressure on them.
Okay. Thank you. One specific question for you, Johan, is in the context of lung cancer. The Beating Cancer Plan repeats the messages on the importance of screening for breast cancer, cervical cancer, and colorectal cancer, and has lung cancer to be considered or evaluated for screening in the future. Is that still something to be discussed, or is that something that's already a given that screening can be set up for lung cancer? What is your opinion on that?
Nothing worthwhile is ever easy. And this rings particularly in the case of lung cancer screening. We have the data from 2 big studies that shows lung cancer mortality prevented by 20-25%. We have the European lung cancer paper which says about the implementation of lung cancer screening all over Europe, but still there is a hesitancy to implement. And this is because of non-well-organized and functioning places where it can be implemented. I strongly believe that lung cancer screening must be implemented, and we are trying in Greece to do it in a pilot, in 2 or 3 pilot centers, in order to face the dilemmas and the problems raising by the acceptance of the public, because it's very difficult to identify patients at high risk in a country where smoking is top lines. And secondly, after this pilot implementation, after 2 or 3 years, to see how we can overcome the hurdles. I strongly believe that this is a must if we would like to do it. But also we have to put an emphasis on prevention. Prevention, not only tobacco quitting, but also climate change, and we have to put into account.
Okay, thank you. Attendees, please continue sending your questions our way. We will collect them, cluster them, and address them to our panelists. A question to Theodora: Does it make sense to have early detection in a different way than is currently done, like genetic studies or other aspects that might, provide earlier detection than is happening today?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, all tools that can improve detection are very welcome. Again, it's very cancer specific, and varying cancers have or don't have biomarkers or specific genetic markers that can be used. So again, I'll highlight that education of healthcare specialists, beginning from the general practitioners, but also first-line consultants that patients get referred to, is also instrumental here. And there should be focused effort and investment in that. This cannot be done on an ad hoc basis or inconsistently. To be able to really see some results, we need to have a concerted effort focused in educating the healthcare community of the various symptoms, the way patients present, and how detection can be really improved.
Great. At this stage, I would like to invite Katie Rizvi to participate in the panel. I don't know whether Katie can be brought online.
I'm here. I'm here. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the.
Can you switch on your camera?
I can see if I can. In the meanwhile, go ahead.
So Katie is founder and CEO of Youth Cancer Europe. Sorry. And I invite her to this panel just to have the perspective of youth cancers.
Yes.
Because you have a very specific place in the whole of cancer treatment. What is your position on the Beating Cancer Plan, and what can be done, especially at national level, to have pediatric oncology plans?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you so much for the question, Stefan. And I listened with great interest to everyone's contributions. And of course, I know Theodora and Antonella from the patient advocacy community. And I do appreciate some of the positive comments about the Beating Cancer Plan, and absolutely 100%. It's a huge step forward and a huge win overall for everyone, but I have to be a little bit more critical. I know we've heard that or that patient organizations and patient advocates were brought in and consulted and all this stuff. And I have to be honest with you, I think there is room for improvement. And for example, I know a lot of patient organizations that, and even through Weekend and ECHO, a lot of the feedback that we provided and a lot of the consultations that we were invited to was after the publishing of the Beating Cancer Plan by the BACA committee, for example, by the European Parliament members and different groups. And that was a good opportunity to give us feedback. So first off, I think that could have been more involvement of patients in the creation of the Beating Cancer Plan, because a lot of the things that were published and were mentioned in the Beating Cancer Plan, like, or, the commission is going to do this and that and the other, a lot of us in the patient community, let's be honest, we're looking at each other thinking, oh, what do they have in mind? What could this mean? Or what will be in a metrics? So I think it's really important to be honest and not just sit here and say, oh, how great, we have a Beating Cancer Plan. I mean, it's great, it's amazing, but I think there's a lot of work ahead. Another very specific example of that is that young people in our community who are under 40 years old. So this is the young people's community under the age of 40, having been diagnosed with cancer either in childhood or adolescent age or in young adulthood. And they read the plan and they said, well, I don't see myself anywhere in this plan. A lot of people would say, the plan was a big gain for childhood cancers because, oh my God, they were at least mentioned. And that's really good. There was a specific chapter, chapter 8, given to them. But young people absolutely do not see themselves in this plan. And this session, this panel conversation was about every cancer type needing its own plan. But we could also kind of turn that into do perhaps very specific demographics, like young adults need their own specific care plan, and that's not even mentioned. We're not expecting an overarching big plan that's quite general to be super granular about everything, but not to even mention the need of it or that they are a very specific population with very specific care needs is a huge omission in the plan, and that's a massive weakness. And another thing maybe that you could say it's age specific. Yes, there is specific mention of childhood cancers, but we do understand that, let's say, a young person treated at the age of 15 will have at least 60 life years ahead of them, and surveillance for late effects and secondary cancers, that strategy for long life monitoring is not adequately addressed in this plan at all. And then, we're going to be talking about the national cancer plans, I think, in panel 3 of this meeting today. But I think just omitting to talk about these things and not paying attention to them at all in the current plan is still a weakness of this plan, and we need to change them. So yes, we need more granularity, we need more detail, we need look at the implementation roadmap. There is 8 pages on prevention. There is 3 pages on care for our current cancer patients, and 3 lines about children and young people with cancer. So I think we need to be more specific, and European Beating Cancer Plan absolutely needs to pay attention to some of those aspects that have been omitted until now. And I don't know if it needs to be disease specific or maybe therapy specific. Because when we talk about late effects, that's what would come to my mind. But absolutely, I would call for a lot more granularity in this plan.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Katie, for your intervention. We'll meet you later in the last panel as well. Maybe before we wrap up, and I think time is flying, we have another question in the chat, but I'll keep that for later. Any final comments from you, Ioannis and Theodora? I mean, I'll skip Antonella if that's okay, because we meet again later. Any things to move things forward? What do you see as the number one priority to move things forward at national level?
I would fully echo what Katie says, that we need more detail and more granularity, and this is something that we can see happening at national level. I think the main role that the European Beating Cancer Plan plays is that it recognizes cancer as a priority on a national level, and then from then on it should be the job of the countries and the governments to really put into practice very specific, very granular and very implementation focused plans to make all that happen.
Thank you, Theodora. Ioannis, you're on mute.
For me, cancer doesn't choose, so we must work to ensure equal access to all that need care. And it's very, very important for me. Number one priority.
Okay, thank you for that insight. Thank you all for your comments. I think now we will move back to the Slido questionnaire. Thanks for your good ideas, and we'll chat later and talk to you later, Antonella, and then thank you, Ioannis and Theodora, for your participation in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Now we move to the next vote for the Slido. We will skip the break. I think we will continue in the interest of time. So I don't see the Clevercast team. So you get the next Slido question. You see the QR code, I hope, because I can't see it, with 3 questions. How do we measure progress? And then the questions are, today's tools are sufficient, annual dashboards with key indicators for each type of cancer and the same in each country. And then the third option is a single European cancer registry with real-time data capture and communication through the European Health Data Space and European Cancer Information System. I don't know from the technical team, I have no view on the Slido or the Slido results on Clevercast. I don't know whether that can be solved. So I assume that you are currently voting. So there are 2 options. You can either use the QR code and film it with your camera on your smartphone, and you will be directed to the Slido. Or the second option is that you go directly to the website of slido.com, and that you then have the code #ECF 2021. Right, I see it now. Thank you for that. How do we measure progress? Single European Cancer Registry at the moment gets the majority with 73%, annual dashboards 27%, and then today's tools are sufficient 0%. I think that sends a clear message. We'll wait for a few more responses to come in, but I think that message is quite clear. I don't see any new votes coming. So let's move then to the next panel, and I'll introduce the 4 participants. First, we have Professor Claudia Alemani, who's a professor of global public health in the Cancer Survival Group at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and also coordinator of the Concord program. Thank you, Claudia, for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
And thanks for being here. Next, we have Dr. Kieran Nicol, who is head of the Health in Society unit of the European Commission, based in Ispra, Italy, in the Joint Research Center. Welcome, Kieran, to our panel. Then we have Thomas Hofmarker, who is a health economist at the Swedish Institute for Health Economics. Thanks for joining us, Thomas. And then we have also Tit Albrecht, who will join and who've been introduced before. So welcome to our panel discussion. Thanks for being here. Maybe Claudia, I can give the floor to you to start with. I mean, we heard from Klaus and from Tit and from the other panelists the importance of data collection, which is your #1 activity.
Yes.
Part. What is
It's
your
a big
reaction
part
to that?
of my research, definitely. So, I mean, this session is about measuring progress, and obviously to measure progress, we need data. I fully agree with Klaus saying that what gets measured gets done, but once again, data are the first element. And I think that the pandemic has taught us that it's possible to get timely data. And we had access to the number of cases and deaths almost on a daily basis in most countries. And this had a very important, this had a public health significance. I believe that with cancer, we are going in the opposite direction. And the reason is that cancer registry in some countries don't have sufficient funding or legislative support to collect data for all cancer patients. And also that data for research are less accessible rather than more accessible, despite the fact that GDPR was designed to harmonize the regulation in the EU country and to make public health research possible while respecting the individual rights. So I don't know if you want me to give a quick answer to the result from the survey, or if I should.
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
I understand the request for an EU cancer registry, but I don't think that this should be seen as a unique center, in the sense that there are long-standing cancer registry in Europe where there is a lot of local expertise that needs to be maintained. And I think that data should be collected locally and then afterwards put together in the EU single cancer registry, if this is what most people think is needed. But for our research, we need individual records because every patient is different. And what I can see from what I heard is that this possible EU database may contain aggregated data that are not what we need for research.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that comment. I don't know, Kieran, you are one of your responsibilities, the European Cancer Information System. What are the challenges for you to aggregate the data from the different member states and to come up with up-to-date and significant and relevant data?
Thank you, Stefan. And by the way, compliments for this event. Great speeches by Klaus, Tit, and the speakers. Nice to see you, Claudia, again, and everybody. Yeah, just to come in on this, maybe as a background, I'd just like to announce against the backdrop of what Tit presented earlier, that the Commission is united like never before in tackling cancer, and this unification needs now to echo in the member states, in the regions, etc., etc. If we look at registration of cancer cases. Indeed, Claudia, she hit the nail on the head there by saying two things. That number one, the cancer registries require support. The EBCP, the Europe Speed and Cancer Plan, is going to allocate €4 billion. The Mission on Cancer, a lot of money as well. Now, the good thing is both of these initiatives have been co-designed together. This has not really happened before in the Commission. So that means interlinkages between public health aspects and research aspects. Now, the European Cancer Information System, which exists thanks to the previous EU funding projects in the past, which relies on input from 150 registries. And right now we're in discussions with RTD about supporting those registries. Registration of cancer cases has been under the radar for far too long. People are doing this in their spare time, 8 o'clock in the evening before going home. It is not fair and not correct, and that needs to be empowered. We had a very successful European Cancer Information Scientific event 3 weeks ago, where we had 350 participants online, massive program. So lots is going to happen there. I'll try to be brief, Stefan, I'm aware of the time, but in the European Cancer Information System, later this year, before the end of the year, we'll be publishing a new section dedicated to pediatric cancers. That's coming out soon. We'll also be publishing a cancer inequalities registry. We're going to next year with the new call for data. We're going to start encoding treatment and staging variables. We're going to geoposition the data to foster linkages with cancer determinants like PM2.5 microns, radon exposure, if we're talking about lung cancer, etc., etc. So I think the good news is that now, for the first time, there are these systems, portals, gateways, and platforms in place in the European Union institutions, which is there to serve the member states. Building upon these can bring this coordination and alignment. And here we're talking about like the Knowledge Centre on Cancer, which we launched last June. Its purpose is to scientifically and technically align the activities together. So there is fragmentation, it's historical. If we pull it together, then we will leverage amazing impact. And that has to echo in the member states. I'll stop now, I'm probably talking too long.
Okay, no, that's fine, that's fine. We'll come back to you with questions. So I still encourage our audience to keep coming with questions. Let's give the floor to Thomas Hofmacher. You look at it from a health economic perspective, and I think you published a few interesting reports on the cost of cancer in Europe, looking at not only the medical data, but also informal care and indirect costs. And you did a special one last year on digestive cancers that we definitely appreciated. Thomas, what is your take on the importance of data?
Well, in general, I'm very happy to have seen that Europe's Speeding Cancer Plan has been launched. There has been mentioning of this inequalities registry that Kieran just alluded to, and I also know that there are now really concrete plans to make this happen and to have a bunch of indicators to measure how cancer care is performing in Europe. We have done this a lot at my research institute for many years now, and as health economists, we of course want to emphasize the focus on costs, which are the most basic input. And I also want to put the numbers just mentioned by Kieran into relation. So indeed, the Europe's Speeding Cancer Plan is funded with 4 billion euros, which might sound like a lot, but our estimations show that every year in Europe we're spending 100 billion euros on cancer care only, and that's just 1 year. I mean, Europe's Speeding Cancer Plan is 4 or 5 years, right? So what's important to remember is that all the actions of caring for patients, it's on the member states to do this and to fund this. That's important to remember. And the other thing that I would like to emphasize is data availability. Claudia's already said that it's a big challenge, but that's the most important thing, to really try to link data, different kinds of data, link input data like costs that we provide or can provide, information on how these costs translate into ways of being used, like how many cancer drugs are we paying for, radiotherapy machines we're paying for, do we have biomarker testing in place, yes or no, and so on. And then the next step, looking at what kinds of outcomes do we produce with the money and the inputs bought. This linkage is incredibly difficult to make because we lack a lot of data along the way. And even if we have data on all of these points, most of them are outdated. So we cannot make a good story of how we translate our investments into concrete patient outcomes.
Right. I think this is a very good point, Thomas. Maybe we should ask Tit to join the conversation. And I think I will have a challenging question. I think if you say 100 billion is the actual direct cost of cancer in Europe, I mean, I checked to what companies spend to identify how much, what they sell and where they sell their products. And so any company has between 1% to 2% of their turnover, of their general sales, in data collection. which would bring it to 1 to 2 billion euro per year for cancer if we extrapolate this to cancer policy. And I think it's sometimes I have the impression that we do not know where the investment goes and what it actually delivers in terms of results. So we invest a lot of money in cancer, sure, in research, in treatment, in prevention plans, etc. But there's insufficient tracking of where the results are being generated and insufficient knowledge of what the actual outcomes are, as Thomas mentioned. Should we invest significantly more so that we can also have a better alignment and probably better efficiency in the system? Because I think there's a lot of waste. OECD mentions 20% of waste in our healthcare system. So with more data, we should be able to have more refined and more personalized, more targeted approaches to cancer. Tit, is that a good question for you?
Yeah, I will start actually, unfortunately for some, with a reference to the current situation. We are flooded with data about COVID. I think too much. Not only that it's present every day, it's the, you know, you cannot basically avoid it. The counts every day and so on, and the percentages and so on. A lot of which is actually not understood by many people. Claudia here and Thomas have probably the best knowledge of maths, and talking to people about logarithmic curves and exponential curves and so on, not many actually do understand that. So that's one problem we actually have, because now it looks like it's very easy to produce data. You just collect some reports from hospitals and, you know, mortality statistics, and here we go. But cancer is, of course, not that simple. And you rightfully said, and Thomas also insisted on that, registries. We have all the brain power in the ENCR, supported by JRC. We have a lot of the sophisticated support, but of course the member states have to realize that, of course, not having a stable and good registry will impede serious analysis. And of course, in turn, they can build new radiotherapy centers, they can introduce new therapies and so on, but that will, of course, not lead to a proper evaluation whether this was worthwhile. Similarly, screening programs, if they are weak, if they are not connected, how will you ever evaluate their effectiveness? And then again, for screening programs, again, you need very good epidemiology. If you had built it already around the registries, you will just upgrade it and they will support it. If not, you know, with all respect to my clinical colleagues, clinical epidemiology is not the same as population epidemiology, and this is another challenge. Anyway, I'm sorry going very much into this side, but Thomas has already mentioned the economic side. The OECD report a few years ago showed a lot of problems when you actually don't have real sources for data. And it was contested, it was repeatedly corrected. In the end, it was totally outdated. So even in our country, they were totally upset because data were from 2010, and I think it was published 10 years later, which meant really nothing, to be honest, in this real world. So the investment in this thin layer in reality of workforce, of equipment they need and so on, is so small compared to all the money that is turning around, which was well illustrated. So I think that I'm looking a bit at Kieran, what the Commission could still try to see how much pressure they can put on the member state in this sense. I'm not saying care, because that's untouchable somehow at this point, but still this, you know, infrastructure. because Eurostat also, when they started coordinating some activities, I remember the point that Claudia outlined. Eurostat required that for hospital statistics, case-based data are collected. So no tabled reports, collective reports, and so on. And here, similarly, we should insist that for cancer epidemiology, there's only individual data collected. Of course, it's not passed to ISPRA, obviously not, but it has to exist at the national level or at least at the regional level, given the diversity that we have in Europe.
Okay, thank you. I'll let Kieran react to it in a minute, but first, Claudia. You're on mute.
I'm sorry. I just want to make 2 points. First, I think we need to be careful on what we mean for data, because data are, the individual records that we need, and then the data that are in other repository are actually indicators calculated on the real data. So I think that what the EU should do is to push for the creation of cancer registry where they are not, and to make sure that where there is a registry, all the information is gathered from the registry in a digital way, wherever possible, so that all hospitals should transmit the information on radiotherapy, chemotherapy, pathology labs on a daily basis, because I think this could be possible, as we saw in other contexts. And then also make clear that this what I call repository rather than a registry of inequalities is actually a collection of indicators available from, calculated from the data in cancer registry. So in the end, I don't see a fragmentation of efforts in the sense that the first source is the cancer registries. And if I may ask a question, since you mentioned that a lot of money is put on research, actually, in the population-based research monitoring incidence, survival, prevalence, and mortality, which are maybe considered too simple but essential for any cancer control policy, I don't see very much where they fit in the plan, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. I don't know who feels they can answer the question. Kieran, maybe you can react to that, or you had a reaction to what it was saying, I think.
Yeah, very interesting exchanges, and I've got a few points here, so I'll try to go through them one by one. There was reference to regarding screening programs, linkages to cancer information system and whatnot. So there are plans, to monitor the impact of screening programs. I mean, if we take breast cancer screening programs, uptake in the EU is from 8% to 90%. This is an inequality in itself. What Claudia mentioned, indeed, the cancer registry data leads to indicators. Indicators build information. Information creates knowledge. I mean, this is the pathway we have to all recognize, and I fully agree with that. And indeed, the granularity in the individual data is where the power lies from an epidemiological point of view, etc., etc. So we're running a little pilot at the moment to look at turning the European cancer information activity 180 degrees. That means from a centralized approach to a federated approach. This will help us to overcome the challenges posed by the GDPR, and will also give us, give Europe a tap into the quality of data contained in registries. We're hoping that with funding to the registries down the line, and we're negotiating with DG Research on that can help hopefully a lot. With regard to coverage, at the moment now in the EU, we're at about 70%. We're also having discussions to increase that up to above 90%. So that's also really important. So again, empowering the data, unleashing its potential is really important. And that unification has to take place. Then you have the backdrop of the European health data space. You have the European Open Science Cloud. You have a big move towards the digital economy, and did mention like electronic, was it data registration in Slovenia, etc., etc. So there's a massive movement towards the digital era, and we have to be in there, and we have to be joining the dots together where the dots can be joined, of course. and that's where you know, the epidemiologists and the data statisticians, the biostatisticians, etc., come into the game. So I think I hope I've covered some of the points, and if not, Stefan, please come back to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Kieran. Thomas.
Yeah, thank you. So I mean, I'm super happy to hear also from the Commission that, you know, there is movement towards collecting data, valid data that can help to inform eventually also policy making. But and maybe this has gained now a sense of urgency also. But if you currently today log on to the website of the European Cancer Information System and you look for survival data, then they are covering the period from 2000 to 2007. So on average, they represent or reflect the situation 2003. Almost 20 years ago. So much has happened during those 20 years in cancer care, and we don't know a lot what were really the outcomes. I mean, the Concord program run by Claudia helps us a lot up until the period 2014. But also since 2014, a lot has happened again in cancer care, especially with the introduction of immunotherapy. I mean, they got the Nobel Prize in 2018 because it was a game changer for many different cancer types, many patients. And we don't know the outcomes of that in a comparable way across European countries, how they were used and brought about benefits to patients. And I'm just, you know, I can only assess what's available today. And today we publish valuable indicators with 8 to 15 years of delay. And that's not acceptable.
Yeah. May I ask a very naive question? Is what prevents us from having data on an annual basis for survivorship? I mean, 5-year survivor. So, I mean, we have real-time data on COVID on a daily basis. So obviously that is not needed for cancer, but I think to have annual data would be a minimum considering the impact of the disease and the cost of the disease in Europe. Tit.
Well, we have on IPAC worked on amending the data set for population-based registries. There were two directions. One was the one that Claudia already mentioned as a much needed one, which is the clinical data, the data on stages, progress of the disease, and so on. This is, of course, essential. We are not saying that clinical registries are not needed. Of course, they're needed. They are needed for individual care, but for population monitoring and adequate survival calculations, of course, you need to have stage-based data as well. Otherwise, this is not properly addressed. Additionally, we explored and we actually propose now also socioeconomic determinants addressed by indicators. And I, of course, agree with Claudia that one thing is the collection and verification of data, and the other one is the preparation of the indicators. And just to comment, I have previously commented to Kieran's colleagues from the Commission on the not best choice of words in terms of the inequalities registry, because for the public health community that means individual-based data, which you probably do not need for the European insight, but of course you do need inequalities in access, inequalities in outcomes, and so on. That's definitely so. So I would say that survivorship is, of course, now the main challenge, and not to forget another category of patients. I always stress this. Some of you have heard me say this many times already. Cancer is not binary anymore. It's not you survive or you die. There are patients who will not be cured, but they have decent quality of life with advanced cancer. But with therapies, they can be controlled. And this is not only a problem of healthcare and monitoring, but it also needs to have data on their quality of care, quality of life, and also their employment possibilities and so on, because not everyone who has cancer is elderly, of course, and many more will be active given that the advancing age and when we are getting retired. Thank you.
There's one question coming from the audience related to that. I think you already answered the one aspect of the question related to measuring quality of life in survivorship. The other part of the question is how then can we make sure that we also track and trace the awareness of symptoms in the general public? How aware are people of the things that they need to be aware of to be able to identify symptoms and act accordingly? Anyone?
I think you have Claudia and Karen already asking for the floor.
All right, Karen.
I think Claudia, just ladies first is always my policy. Claudia, you had your hand up first.
Okay. Well, actually, I was asking the floor for something that was said earlier.
Okay,
First of all, I thank for the mention of the fact that we published survival results for 2010-14. Obviously, and this is to Kieran, I would be very happy if these results were included in the EU portal. And, you know, we had discussed, we can discuss again about it. I would like to clarify something that, you know, these data were actually very timely because they were published in 2018. And, you know, the one thing that people don't have in their mind when they think why we don't have 5-year survival. Well, the first answer is because we don't have 5-year follow-up for all the patient diagnosed, say, in 2018 to 2020. Then we have methodology to predict it, but the follow-up, the 5-year follow-up so far, if available, is available only for patient diagnosed in 2016, and this is life. So, you know, in the end, you would, if you think in these terms, 2014 is not that bad, and actually is the most up-to-date option that we have. On the other hand, you know, if data were timely, we could monitor 1-year survival to start with, you know, and predict the 5-year for the most recent years.
But don't we don't run behind the reality, because I think as mentioned by Thomas, is that I think we have had 50 new indications in cancer drugs in the last 10 years. We have fantastic new imaging technology, diagnostic technology, surgery technology that was launched in the past few years. So how do we capture the value of that?
As I said, we could do that, but capturing only 1-year survival, 2-year survival, if you want this in a timely manner on current data. But again, in many registries, we don't have this data yet. I think that many registries are up to 2018, probably. Okay. And the pandemic didn't help.
Sure. Kieran.
Yes, thank you. Again, a number of points. First of all, to talk about the Cancer Inequalities Registry, you're right. It is not a registry. It is an indicators framework, but the thing is that was somehow encoded at a very early stage in the Europe Speeding Cancer Plan. It came to us this summer, and there are plans next year to change that name, because you're absolutely correct. Fresh data. Our data is too old. It is. But we know from various cancer registries that we can have much more timely data. The practices are out there in Europe, in the member states, etc. So that is one of the objectives, again, in the coming years, to improve the timeliness. I mean, we're relying too much on estimates, even though they're calculated with meticulous precision, using, you know, the best people probably in the world, but still, we need to have fresh data. Survival, absolutely, Claudia, it's a missing part of the equation. Concord has done such excellent work. There have been other initiatives also. So as the Commission is now united in tackling cancer, so we need to unite in the member states. So all these wonderful activities that have been somehow developed at a level of excellence, but a little bit fragmented, this needs to be brought together. So we will immediately open up discussions with you, Claudia, and Concord about the inclusion of survival data in the EU portal or cancer information system, call it what you like. We'll be also publishing more on prevalence in the coming months as well. So, by the way, just looking at Thomas there about the economic side, we did a survey not long ago, and we have data that the cost of registration of a single cancer case varies from 0.28 euro cents to 0.89 euro cents throughout the EU. And what a small cost compared to what goes into, the treatment, the screening, the diagnosis, and palliative care, any aspect, the whole pathway. So it is an opportunity that we really need to support registration and empower it. And for socioeconomic science, just to finish, when we geoposition the cancer data, and we're talking NUTS 2, NUTS 3 level, we in the GRC have access to a lot of other data sets. So when we finally start addressing cancer in a more holistic way, and their socioeconomic indicators will be very important. So we tend to link up and to do overlays. It will not be concluding causality. We know this from our own research. I was in Heidelberg, etc., etc. That's a very dangerous word to say, but you can see trends and patterns, and this we need to go into. And then you move in with your high resolution study to confirm or validate as necessary. I'll stop now, and I'll see back to you, Stefan.
I have my electronic health record on my smartphone, like thousands of other patients. How difficult can it be to aggregate the data that is available on smartphones in a digital platform and get insights from that on an almost real-time basis? I mean, we as patient organizations can ask surveys to our patients and link, the more socioeconomic questions to the actual hard medical data on the electronic health record. Patient organizations, through their membership, could actually be a fantastic access point to get data in the future. And digital makes it possible. I think technologically it's already possible. Is that an option for you? Is that something that is feasible in terms of collecting data in a faster way? You don't capture all the patients, but at least you have a good profile of what's happening. Claudia? Thomas, I'll get back to you in a minute. Yeah.
Okay, I think that this could be another of the many sources that cancer registry can use if cancer patients are happy about it. But I want to go back to the point of what I think is not the GDPR, but the misinterpretation of GDPR, because actually GDPR was designed to harmonize the law in a way to use anonymized data for public health research, and it's very clear. But the problem is that in some countries, there are local regulations that would stop you using even the information that is already available. So I cannot think how we could use more information if even the information that they are currently collected, they try to stop the use.
And that's because of a misinterpretation of that GDPR regulation.
Yes, or including other regulation I don't know. I honestly don't know the reason why they need this, because I think that the scope of the GDPR was actually exactly to overcome this kind of problems.
Right. Okay, Thomas, any?
I just wanted to make a point relating to what Claudia said. I mean, in general, yes, let's also measure 1 year survival, 2 year and 5 and even 10 year survival. I mean, that's what we have to do. It's true that, if you want to have definite numbers, you have to wait 5 years if we want to get a precise number for a 5-year survival rate. Obviously, there are modeling methods where you can extrapolate this, and this is validated. So that's not a technical challenge to do this. But the issue is that we don't get the information published in a timely manner. As you said, Claudia, you published in 2018 in the Lancet your estimates for 2010 to 2014. Great, but now we're waiting for the next stage for data up to 2019. I'm not sure when you're planning to publish this. Then again, we will just have 5-year survival data. I believe that also the European Commission should make an effort to support either you or Eurocare or any organization who has the power to do this, to provide data every year so that we can work with almost up-to-date data. How difficult can this be? And how much can it cost? I mean, hardly anything in relation to what we actually already spent on cancer care.
Claudia, that's a good challenge.
Well, I cannot agree more with what you say, in the sense that I reiterate my points. Well, first of all, I would like to say that we are about to call for data soon to update our database on a global scale, not just in Europe. And you know, the challenge is, again, support to the registries to be able, not only in a few countries, to collect this information, let's say at least up to 2019, at least. And second, to support researchers, because, you know, the delays are due to the lack of data at the source, or the problem we have with accessibility. You can't imagine, we have more than hundreds data agreements with various countries worldwide, and now this problem is occurring in Europe as well. It takes a long time for researcher to get a data agreement, and we had to spend more time in administration and legislation rather than doing research. Then another problem that you touched is that we need resources too. If we have also to spend our time constantly to look for resources, you know, this is another delay. If all this is set, trust me, you would have your data, you know, in the timely manner that you need.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we have time constraints. We could continue, I think, for quite a while, but I think we've gathered some very good insights and understandings. We all see that the value of data, I think the more data we have, the better it is, at least if it's harmonized, streamlined, accessible, and relevant. But I think what I understand from Kieran is that the Commission is doing its utmost to move things forward, and also from the member states, we hope the same. Thank you all for your active participation, for your comments and on sometimes controversial topics, but I hope that it will be reflected in the report that will be published based on this discussion, and that these messages will be taken home by the different participants and readers. So many thanks for your time. And now we will move on to the next survey part. Thank you all. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. And so the next Slido, if I can see it on screen, again, use the QR code with your smartphone to get access to the survey, or type in slido.com in your browser with the hashtag ECF 2021 as the access code for the survey. I'll wait a few minutes before everybody has logged on and completed the survey. It would be great if I can see the survey, because I don't have a view on it at the moment. Thank you. So, how do we ensure implementation is the question. A multi-stakeholder observatory for each type of cancer in each member state and at EU level. Second, an annual overview of progress by the European Parliament. And three, that is the role of the member states, and the European Union should not intervene, is the third possibility. I must say, I see things moving, so I'll wait a few seconds for everybody to complete the questionnaire. I can already say that the last question or option is definitely the least popular, and I think the majority of participants are proponents of a multi-stakeholder observatory for each type of cancer. So I think that is very clear. I think I see things moving, but not significantly. So I suggest that I introduce our next panel, and two of these panelists we have already met today. The first one is Antonella Cardone, Director of the European Cancer Patient Coalition. We have Katie Rizvi, Founder and CEO of Youth Cancer Europe. And our new panelist is Christian Silvio Buzoy, member of the European Parliament and chair of the Challenge Cancer Intergroup. Welcome, Christian Busoy, for your participation, and welcome back, Katie and Antonella. I will start by having your reaction on the survey. Christian, can I start with you?
Hello, thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here with you. And of course, how to ensure plans are implemented is a very important question, because we have an ambitious European beating cancer plan. We have a lot of ambitious goals, objectives, but of course we have to make sure that the plans are implemented. Would you like me to say a few words now?
Yes, sure. Go ahead.
The issue, and then maybe I will answer to some of the questions. It is estimated that by 2035, the cancer cases in the European Union could have doubled in number, and a lot of you citizens will face cancer at some stage in their lives. Despite efforts to reduce the incidence of cases in Europe, despite some progresses that were made in the past years, cancer remains one of the main challenges affecting citizens and the society as a whole. And what is also very important, and is very clearly stated in the European Beating Cancer Plan, 40% of cancers are considered to be preventable if we implement good cancer plans and screenings. Now we have also COVID-19, and it is unfortunately not over yet. And beside the burden that COVID-19 pandemic is putting on the healthcare in general, and the number of human medical resources, hospitalization resources, attention of the policymakers, budget resources that should be devoted to COVID-19 and may be diverted from other pathologies, we have also a serious impact on cancer patients, because it is clear that we experience delayed screening process, delayed surgery on interventions, especially in the peaks and the most important point of the wave, delayed interventions, weakened immune system, increased risk for cancer patients facing COVID-19, delayed treatment, and this is something that we should deal urgently. But beside the COVID-19, we should continue to implement the EU Beating Cancer Plan, and one of the important concrete action that should be taken, and one of the key pillar of the insurance that the plans are implemented is to update or build the National Cancer Control Plan. Because many of the member states did not update them, some of the member states, 19%, and unfortunately it is also the case of my country, Romania, do not have a National Cancer Control Plan at all. So here we should push, and without updating or building the National Cancer Control Plan, it is very difficult to implement the plans. And this is an important pillar and a very concrete thing that we have to follow, and we have to be sure that it will be implemented. Then, of course, we should look to the financing opportunities. And here, of course, EU4Health started this year. It's the first year and only half of the year. But starting from next year, we should see in EU4Health clear activities, concrete activities that will be supported via this important program in the area of cancer. There is now a call open to support accreditation and certification of quality assurance schemes for breast, colorectal and cervical cancer screening programs, but many other activities are envisaged for the coming years, and they should be, of course, in total connection and coordination with EU Beating Cancer Plan. Then, of course, we should look to the cancer mission, Horizon Europe Cancer Mission, because this will be also an important instrument in order to advance in our plan. And here we should make sure that the mission should focus on the right areas, on the right instruments, and should be ambitious enough. And clearly, we have also the cohesion funds, and we have the recovery and resilience facility. Each member states have some plans to update, to improve, to invest in the health infrastructure. And here, clearly, we need a very ambitious approach, and we have to follow what member states are doing with these opportunities. And nevertheless, finally, Digital Europe, the cancer patient registries should become a reality in the coming years. It will help a lot to take decisions, to use the most effective way the funds, to know exactly what the situation is, to follow some of the improvements that we could do, and to have these registries in an electronic format could be also extremely helpful. That's why it's clear that the option is to implement the EU Beating Cancer Plan, to push for member states to do their job, to try to use all opportunities and all the financing instruments, and to also continue to do our utmost possible, to do our best in order that during still the pandemics to improve the situation of the cancer patients, not to be forgotten, not to be put aside, but to remain with the focus on them, because they should not experience delay early diagnosis, delayed investigation, and delayed treatments, and to be protected because some of them are vulnerable due to treatments, due to their medical conditions, to protect them to the new variants and to the COVID-19 situations. Thank you so much, and I'm here for questions.
Thank you, Christian, for this great overview of instruments. Quick reaction from either Katie or Antonella. What is the role of patient organizations in order to measure progress also at national level and make sure that, as Christian said, the plans are also implemented at national level? How do you see the role of patient organizations there to help guide the process or supervise what's happening?
Exactly. Thank you so much for the question. And if Antonella doesn't mind, I'm happy to take this first, because, well, I have the privilege of knowing Mr. Bushoy because with Youth Cancer Europe, we have actually worked together on some, and he hosted some of our events in the European Parliament, and he knows our activity. But also, strangely enough, before starting Youth Cancer Europe, I set up a charity in Romania, and we are currently still providing psychosocial care in the clinical setting to between 1,700 to 2,000 pediatric cancer patients a year. So that's actually a huge clinical experience. And what I can say is we could actually use Romania sort of like an example for our conversation here, because just like Christian said, we need to push the member states to create the national cancer plans. I have been absolutely ineffective in doing that in Romania. So if you can, and the only reason I gave this background of the number of patients that we see in the clinical setting through our employed support workers who work inside hospitals all across the country, and still we are absolutely not able to have any influence whatsoever on forming a cancer plan. So we know that there is a dedicated group, there is a person who was nominated, but of course we also have to take into consideration the changing, the always changing political climate of Romania and the lack of stability that we see. But even if there are nominated persons who are in charge, who should be working on this, and there is a group who should be creating a national cancer control plan, it is absolutely impossible for us to know how to be part of any strategic consultation, not ad hoc, oh, let's listen to patients, but any strategic influence, so that such cancer control plan will actually be co-created not with citizens, because as you've said before, I don't want my neighbor to say how my cancer needs to be treated, but with the strategic involvement of patients. And another question would be that once such cancer control plans are created, where are the metrics? You know, where is the implementation roadmap for those, you know, glorious general cancer control plans? So I think, you know, what we are in search of here is really discussing how we can connect the dots. And I'm happy to talk about it more later on. And I trust that Christian didn't take this as a personal comment, as we know each other enough so that you know it's not personal. But I think it's a really good case study. A lot of work, incredibly active patient advocates, and we are not able to have an influence on the national member state.
Okay, thank you, Katie. You also come with a question. I think we'll park it for the moment and let Christian react to it. Maybe he has ideas on how to solve it. Antonella, what is your take?
Well,
on how to measure progress, on track progress. Sorry.
Thank you, Stefan, again. And so a lot has already been said on the relevance of the Europe's Beating Cancer Plan. Europe is planning now to take a radical step to end the rising burden of cancer. So we are now looking at its best and effective implementation. And we have to act now to reverse the trend of cancer becoming the leading cause of mortality in Europe. And we cannot afford the risk for the plan not to be a success. It has already been said, so I'm glad that several panelists share the same opinion on this. So we needed to make sure that Europe's Beating Cancer Plan includes in its implementation a framework to monitor progress and the success of the different measures in the plan with a broad governance. It is said also by the audience. I mean, I agree with the majority of the audience that a multi-stakeholder governance is essential for the implementation of Europe's Beating Cancer Plan. And so we are living a new momentum, and we need to work all together for the success of the plan. So with the FPI and the ECO, we have emphasized the need for tracking the progress during the implementation of the plan through different existing tools like the Inequalities Registry, the Cancer Plan Implementation Group, the Enhanced European Cancer Information System. But we also believe that they should be consistent with an overall cancer plan dashboard. Of course, the European observatories by type of cancer that generate statistics across Europe on all major cancer types will help identify key concerns that need to be addressed. So to sum up, in order to tackle cancer in Europe, a coordinated action is needed. The EU, along with the member states and subnational levels, need to improve their collaboration with the intention to improve the availability, accessibility, and affordability of cancer care. It will take healthcare organizations, patient advocacy groups, all relevant stakeholders, politicians, policymakers to come together to implement the changes and monitor their successes.
Okay, thank you. I go back to Christian. I mean, you heard the question from Katie, but I also want to add the question on the Challenge Cancer Intergroup that you're chair of the European Parliament. What is the role going to be, and how will that interact with the special committee on the Beating Cancer Plan within the Parliament? Because that's not always clear to people who are not familiar with the workings of the European Parliament. Maybe you can explain a little bit about that.
Yes, sure. Thank you so much. On Romania, of course, Romania is one of the countries where the inequalities, when we talk about the quality of service, when we talk about access to treatment, when we talk about early diagnosis, when we look to the prevention side, are quite high. In general, we see inequalities between Central East European countries and the Western and the Nordic ones. But let's say Romania, Bulgaria are among the countries where the situation is the most difficult. In regards to the access to treatment, of course, the situation improved in the last years for some types of cancer. For others, of course, we didn't make very much of improvements. It is clear that we need to build a comprehensive cancer plan. There is also a project financed by European funds to collect data and to involve all stakeholders and all experts in order to build this plan. This is something that I'm also trying to push publicly and also in my discussions with colleagues from the government, from my party, from the other important party of the coalition that have now the responsibility for Minister of Health, to try to advance a little bit more in this direction. I would say that also now Romania is facing the most difficult situation with COVID-19. We have among the highest number of deaths and the lowest vaccination rate. These are, of course, interconnected. And despite the efforts of the government, despite the efforts of the political elite, political involved people, we don't see much improvement because the disinformation is very high and the offensive on the social networks and even on some televisions is unfortunately very strong. But even that, all the attention, or a lot of the attention, is now to manage the situation of COVID-19, fourth and fifth wave. The political instability was mentioned. Now this is solved. Since last week, we have a new coalition government with the two most important parties, long-time enemies, governing together and sharing responsibilities, with a plan to have 3 years of this coalition, with the change of prime minister at 1 year and a half. Now ours, after 1 year and a half, the Social Democrat prime minister. And with this new stability, I hope that the situation will change, because the political instability in the last 2 years was also a cause, and it was well evidenced earlier. But it's clear that we should focus on each member state. The situation is different, and it's clear that also European Commission and the Task Force for EU Beating Cancer Plan should focus more on those countries where the situation is more difficult. Improvement can be done anywhere, even in France, Germany, Nordic countries where the situation is much better. But even there are things that could be improved. Clearly, more investment is needed everywhere. But of course, in some cases, we should focus more attention and should put more pressure in order to change and advance the agenda. As regards the second question, I would say that we have in European Parliament, of course, the ENVI committee, sometimes in correlation with other committees, which have the legislative power. And when we discussed Horizon Europe, it was the committee that I'm chairman, Industry, Research and Energy Committee, where the final decision was taken. But the input from ENVI at that time, I was the rapporteur for the health strand, for the health part of Horizon Europe, and the Mission for Cancer was also something that I contributed a lot. So the input from ENVI was very important. Apart from the legislation, here we have the committees and especially Environment and Health Committee. And with the new pharma strategy legislation, with the new enhanced role of European Medicine Agency, and also the revision of orphan and pediatric medicine, all this will go to the legislative committees. Then we have some bodies specialized for cancer. We have the special committee, BECA, and here, of course, they have some initiatives. Then they have a comprehensive report, and they organize also debates under the framework of BECA committee. We have the intergroup that I'm chairing, Challenge Cancer, which is an official intergroup of European Parliament. And you know that at the beginning of each term, some of the intergroups are approved by the Permanent Bureau of European Parliament, looking at the support from parliamentarians. And I can proudly say, and it was a huge support from ECPC, from European Cancer Patient Coalition, and we work together with the ECPC in all the activities of the intergroup, that our intergroup was among the most supported and it was clearly approved. And here we organize events in order to raise awareness, to make colleagues understand better, to discuss among ourselves what would be the best solution, the best policy option, and we'll continue to do that and try to involve more and more stakeholders, and also invite European Commission, invite the Presidency of the Council to advance in this agenda. And there is an old established informal group, MAP Against Cancer, MAC, which are also trying to organize some events. It's not bad that we have all these frameworks, because the cancer is much more and more visible, and I hope that it will not be a sterile competition, but a good coordination and a synergy between all these instruments inside European Parliament. But ultimately, when you talk about legislation, we should go to the permanent committees from EP.
Thank you for that clarification. Antonella, you wanted to comment?
Yes, I would like to just complement what MEP Bushoi just mentioned. So we are managing the secretariat of the Challenge Cancer Intergroup, and we work very, very closely and very well with the intergroup. And I would also like to reinforce the fact that we are supporting the Challenge Cancer Intergroup, but never in competition with any of the other committees. We work, we try to complement the work that others do. And of course, as Bushoi mentioned before, there is so much that needs to be done on cancer that even what all the committees there are not enough.
Right. One of the challenges that we also notice, of course, is that even if member states have their translation of the European Beating Cancer Plan at their national level, they still have the regions who are responsible very often for prevention, screening, and have all different priorities and different stages of development. To which extent is it possible from a European perspective to have an influence on what's happening in the regions? And is there a kind of a counterpart to discuss this with, between the European Union and the regions directly? Anyone of you? Any views on this?
Well, of course, most of the decisions in order to make a difference and to advance are not at the level of European institutions. This is something very clear for us, for all of us, which from many years try to push a little bit and to see a more prominent role of European institutions. I'm also, I can also say that now is a good momentum for health. Unfortunately, it took a pandemic in order to make a lot of the policymakers at the EU level and national member state level to understand that they should focus more on health, and also for the general population to understand that the health system are not enough prepared. But if you remember the initiative to put cancer in the core of the policy of European Union in the coming years was taken before the pandemic. So was taken when the new European Commission was installed with a strong commitment from President Ursula von der Leyen, with a very strong commitment of Commissioner Stella Kyriakides, with a clear mention of cancer as a priority in her mandate letter. And the pandemic just delayed a little bit, or did not allow to concentrate only, or primarily not only, because there are also other diseases and other challenges that should be concentrated, but not concentrating mainly on cancer, but to look also on the pandemics as a very important challenge to manage. But clearly, EU institutions will do more in the future. The role of the member states will be, however, the most important. And there is a dialogue. You mentioned the connection with the national governments and regional. In some European countries, of course, the regions have more prerogatives on health issues. It's not the case of Central and East European countries, which are still very centralized. Maybe Poland is a little bit different with the voivodats, but the other countries are very much centralized. The regions do not play a very important role. But in France, in Italy, in Germany, the states, the situation is exactly as you are describing. There is the European semester as a tool of European Commission to make different suggestions and proposals in the area of health. We have also all the informal and formal dialogue between European Commission and the member states. We have the Committee of Regions. They started to discuss health issues and they are inviting us, the most active parliamentarians, to different events of theirs related to health. We should use this also because they can deliver the message. We have some instruments. It's important to use it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Katie, I want to come back to you. I think also the role of patient organizations at national level is quite important. And we've seen, I mean, you may not be happy that not everything is included in the Beating Cancer Plan, but at least some aspects like EU network of youth cancer survivors is part of it. And I think also aspects of the right to be forgotten. So what are you doing at national level to make sure that member states also apply these different aspects that are in the Beating Cancer Plan, and also probably on your own agenda?
Yes, thank you for the question. Well, first of all, yes. So thank you for being very politically correct in the way you said that. I have some notes on room to improve the Beating Cancer Plan, but obviously, just like everyone else and every patient organization as well in Europe, we applaud the cancer plan. I mean, we couldn't imagine Europe without the Beating Cancer Plan. It's a game changer and absolutely very important, especially the funding that will be available through the implementation course of the cancer plan. So I think maybe what we are just trying to see is that we want to benefit from this cancer plan and this focus on cancer the most, and want to make sure that that the patient organizations' voices and patient advocates' voices will be adequately involved. And when you are, so yes, this panel is about implementation, right? And you had very specific questions, for example, on the cancer survivorship network. Yes, we, just like many other organizations, we also submitted a bid in collaboration with other leading organizations in Europe. And we feel that these grants could really be a game changer, and they could really make a difference in Europe, and making sure that survivorship is going to be acknowledged, survivorship is going to be talked about. As we said earlier, cancer is not a binary thing anymore. It's not like you die or you survive. It's in most cases you survive, but how? And that's what we will be able to focus on. But I really feel that there are many other areas of implementation that each member state is a different game plan. And Europe is, is cultivating a stronger and stronger patient advocacy network with very smart advocates who really would like to have a say in local policies and have an effect on local regulations. And you asked very specifically about the right to be forgotten. So in 2017, when we had our 2018, in fact, when we had our first meeting in the European Parliament, hosted by Mr. Bushoi, actually, on the right to be forgotten, we had only France as an example. On the day of the event, one of the Belgian ministers tweeted about our event, saying that it's at that moment on their table and they will be reviewing it. And now we have 5 European countries where it is implemented to different degrees. So absolutely, there is a lot that can be done for implementation. I think maybe just one comment that I would like to say is that I think we started this whole meeting with, does the beating cancer plan need to be more specific? Is there a need for more granularity? And I think maybe even in the implementation, yes, absolutely, there is a little bit more need for specifics in how, while the European Union cannot legislate righteousness on member state level and cannot get involved in local policies, absolutely, but we could be a little bit clearer about some of the incentives so that national member states will have the national cancer plans, and some of the instruments that will be available through the cancer plan, like the national comprehensive cancer infrastructures, etc. We might need to, it would be really nice to see a very clear roadmap just from national member states, how they can avail themselves of all of these opportunities and what conditions there will be, so that we could deliver a bigger bang for our buck through this plan.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Katie. I think very, very good points. I think we're reaching the end of our panel discussion time. Maybe for each of you, one last comment in terms of the next steps and what you see as an important priority moving forward, but very quickly. Antonella?
Well, definitely, as said already, what is important now is the implementation, and the implementation can only be made with the support of all the relevant stakeholders who should also be involved in measuring the success of the plan.
Thank you. Christian?
I think we should focus clearly on the national member states to update their national cancer control plans, and especially a focus on those countries where the situation is worse. We should take a good look and have a constant pressure from the European Parliament part, but also from all stakeholders, to European Commission for the EU4Health to really be bold, to really be very, very ambitious on EU4Health. They promised 1.25 billion in the next 7 years to support cancer actions. And of course, to look to the Horizon Europe mission for cancer. Out of 8 billion, 2 billion should be devoted for research and innovation to support the cancer-related research projects. We should not waste these great opportunities.
Wonderful, thank you. Katie?
Right, it's just, I think what I've said before, that I think just like we have that was published about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, the implementation roadmap for the Beating Cancer Plan, I think a similar roadmap would need to be created for the member states. Just spell it out very, very clearly. What are the conditions and what is going to be expected from them? And yes, absolutely, hold them responsible for having their national cancer plans. It should be part of the European goal. How can it not be part of the European expectation for individual member states to deliver a plan?
Right. Thank you, Katie, for these final comments. You were our last speaker of the day, our last panelist of the day. So many thanks, Antonella, Christian, and Katie, for your active participation and your insights and explanations. We wish you a very nice day. And now we will wrap up the session of today.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like Klaus maybe to already join for the last wrap up of the day.
I'm here.
Hi, Klaus. Nice to see you back. So I think my takeaways for the meeting were quite positive. I think the overall response on the Beating Cancer Plan was called a game changer by some. It was a major step forward as designed by others. A turning point, culmination of 20 or even longer years of Europe against cancer. So I think the general appreciation of the plan is quite positive. And I think the big challenges lie in how do we make this work at the national level? How is the implementation going to work? I like Katie's suggestion to have the roadmap translated at national level and not have just a plan, but a real roadmap with key indicators and progress measures of how the plan can be implemented. With Christian Bezoy, I think we rely also on the European Commission, but also on patient advocates and the oncology community to keep track of what is happening, to make sure that we put sufficient pressure on the system and influence to make sure that the great ideas of the Beating Cancer Plan are actually implemented at national level. And I think also because the fact that the budget is available, that the right budget should also be allocated to data collection, because I think this is came out very clearly from the panel. The more data you have, the clearer the way forward, the clearer the indication of where progress has been reached or can be reached. And I think this is critical for any organization that respects itself. So, I mean, these are my takeaway points. I don't know, Klaus, what your reaction was to what you heard during the sessions.
Yeah, Stefan, no, I very much agree with you. What you just nicely articulated is exactly, I guess, what I heard, and also the commitment to make it happen. And let me be super brief, just on three things, as I would see it. I mean, no one can succeed on this major undertaking ahead of us alone. And let's be clear, it's not an easy one and it's not a fast one. It's a lot of work ahead of us and no one can succeed alone. The good thing is, as you saw it from the lively and collaborative discussion today, is that we have each other and we are a very rich and diverse community, sharing the same dedication and urgency, sense of urgency to get us into the agreed actions and measures. And as I mentioned at the start, Stefan, I think what is really so important, what gets measured, gets done, including all the data, and then being translated to country plans. And we all seem, and this is my essence of today, we all are behind that same agreement, and we are also willing to stay true to ourselves. So I think it was the right discussion, the right level. It was very rich, and in essence, we agreed that we all want to achieve the same, which makes me very hopeful for the future collaboration. Back to you, Stefan.
Thank you, Klaus. And I think, as you mentioned, that introduction is that there will be a report made of the conversations of today. And the plan is to have that published by International Cancer Day on February the 4th. I think that was the time scheduled for it.
Yes, correct.
So we'll make sure that all the insights of today are captured, and also with the references for further reading and contacts. So I want to thank everybody who's participated in this event. I want to thank, obviously, MSD, Lung Cancer Europe, ECPC, and the Swedish Institute for Health Economics. I want to thank TIT for his active collaboration. I want to thank all the panelists for their lively interventions, the time they invested in preparation and participation. I want to thank all the attendees for their participation in some of the questions that were shared. And I want to thank also the technical team who made sure that everything was possible. So You will hear again from us. Many thanks for your participation, and we wish you all a very good day. Thank you. And bye-bye.
Stefan, thanks a lot to you as well.
Okay, thank you, Klaus. Yeah, have a nice day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.